What's up again, everybody? Well, if you didn't hear the news, the time has finally come for this big guy to hit the old dusty trail right off into the sunset, join his friends? The acquaintances? Probably. I mean, they may not have ever run into each other. I guess we'll find out perhaps in the lore if Dusk Till Dawn, if Oldhim actually does meet Prism. Nevertheless, he'll ride off to join his compatriots, we'll say that, in the Living Legend format, because officially Living Legended out is none other than Oldhim, thanks to Pablo Pintor's win of the Calling Antwerp this past weekend. And with it, as we kind of approach summer, we're starting to get a little warmer in the meta. Mr. Fatigue here is no longer around with us, or I should say, will no longer be around with us within the next 2 or so weeks. He will still be legal through the Road to National season until their banned and suspended announcement that takes place like right before ish, like 2 weeks before, I think, the Dusk Till Dawn supplemental set that will be coming out pretty soon, within the next like 2 months. So he'll be around for a little bit longer, but after the Road to National season, we will have a ban and suspended announcement, and for a few weeks, at the very least, we're going to have a completely fresh new meta, and it's going to be interesting to talk about. We're going to look at what that could look like here going forward, and of course, we should put the big ol' asterisk that the next set, being a supplemental set, could very deeply change the way the meta will function and certain heroes will function, but we do know for a fact that this guy won't be a part of it for at least a little bit. So let's break down some of the numbers first and then talk about what this meta could look like. This is a spreadsheet that I quickly whipped up based on the Calling Antwerp and the numbers that we saw there. So if you're looking at this, there were 644 players based on the numbers that I got from the live blog. If these hero numbers were correct, there were 644 registered players. So that's the numbers that I used, and then I based the numbers on day 2 and of course the top 8 to create these other fields. So looking at how this meta played out and thinking specifically about Oldhim was only 9.8%, so about 10% of the meta for this Calling. Lexi again dominating the I guess minds and zeitgeist of this community. Zeitgeist is not the correct term to use there, but I'm going to use it anyway because that word is cool. 21% basically of the meta. And Oldhim, of course, like I said, being about 10%. Dromai was at the top there, and these were the big 3, with a bit of a drop-off with Katsu and Azalea both being pretty well represented with 40 players each. But then you look at the day 2 percentage, and the biggest percent of the field in day 2 was, of course, Lexi because of just being that large as the day 1. But the conversion rate to get there was definitely a dip, right? So this column right here is calculating this value. Let me just click it so it'll show you. It's calculating this. So this is literally just taking the number of players in day 1, so 133, and the number of players that were able to advance into day 2. Right, so the higher this number is, the more, you could conceivably say, the more effective that hero is in the meta to get you to higher finishes. And so, of course, if we look at it from that perspective, Oldhim, most effective out of all of the heroes to get you into that day 2, because we had 25% of those players actually cutting it into day 2. 25%, I should say, of the field is made up of Oldhims in day 2. 33% of the players that chose to play Oldhim cut into day 2. That is a very large percentage, which is kind of crazy and really important to note, because I'll go back to the Calling. Let's just go. Here's the data for the Calling Baltimore. Okay, this is the Calling Baltimore, and Oldhim here sitting. This is the matchup percentages with just like the best overall win percentages for the Calling Baltimore, because the dude's just real good into the meta. And then here's the win percentages for the Pro Tour, and he's down here, and the numbers aren't as strong, but the dude's just sitting pretty. I can say that. I'm gonna say that. Sitting pretty well. He's been consistently really good just in general. A really good pick, a very flexible pick. And the more that this meta's panned out, as you can see, the better he has done overall. He has a lot of tools. And just while we're here, I might as well kind of throw this in there. The other really big kind of interesting little point here, Rhinar doing some work. Only 8 players represented in the entirety of the field, but 2 of them made day 2. And 1 of them made top 8. So that's a really good conversion percentage for Rhinar, surprisingly in this meta, just doing really, really well. Which is kind of intriguing, kind of interesting. If we compare that to like the Calling Baltimore here, not necessarily the higher win percentage. So it could just be an isolated thing. This is the data for the Pro Tour Baltimore as well, whereas Rhinar's down here. Overall win percentage not huge, not great. And I'm sure you could go into the weeds on a lot of this, but I'm specifically thinking about the old guy because the old guy wins it here, won it at the Pro Tour as well, and did not pick up a win in the Calling Baltimore, but wins it here in the Calling that just happened that sends him packing. And as we're looking at what his removal and how that could affect the meta, what that means, well, we have to go backwards in time to both of these other spreadsheets that I've been kind of calling back and kind of look at what his matchups looked like. So here's, for example, this is the Calling Baltimore, and I can't do this for the Calling Antwerp because this is just recently happening. I'm doing this video like a few hours after the win is secured, and OLDHIM kind of signs himself away and flies off into the beautiful sunset. But if this is the matchup kind of spread for OLDHIM, for the Calling, the largest Calling that's ever been hosted. This is pretty decent data, which by the way, if you're curious, I literally took all of the data that was kind of given to me. I reworked it. I took out all of the buys, and then I took out all of the, apparently some people registered as Chain, and some people registered as Bravo Star of the Show. You can't do that. So I took out those ones. So this data has been cleaned up heavily and corrected. There were a couple of these percentages that were actually off. So I did that, and then I put them all in here. And this is what we get. So overall win percentage of the Calling Baltimore, OLDHIM had the most, like the highest win percentage out of everyone, including out of Lexi. Weirdly enough, Icelander was actually way up there, but super low represented. Let's take a look at the best matchups that OLDHIM had. So against Azalea, he was sitting at a 67% win rate. Against Bravo, a 65% win rate. And then you come over here, Dorinthia, an 81% win rate. Without OLDHIM in the meta, does Dorinthia have a shot at coming back? Well, you could ask that question and look down here at the Dorinthia column and go, okay, well, what is Dorinthia bad into besides just being terrible into the old man? Well, unfortunately, Dromai is not a great matchup at 35% win rate, which is interesting because against a Dromai player, if you're able to kind of farm those counters on your Dawnblade, maybe you could get there, but just not. The field is saying no. The field is saying very no. But OLDHIM was clearly that worst. I mean, if we go over here and we click, like, it's a 19% win rate. It's clearly the worst outside of this 0% against Riptide. But then you look at, like, okay, but it's also not great against Azuri. And Azuri is actually looking to trend upward. And so Dorinthia maybe not kind of sneaking back in because she still has to deal with like Lexi Livewire as well. So you look at that, you're like, okay, maybe OLDHIM doesn't allow for Dorinthia to come back, but perhaps some other heroes. What about Dromai? Dromai's stock could go up now that she doesn't have to sideboard a bunch of fatigue plans. Now you're looking at this field and you're going, okay, are there any, as a Dromai player, are there any heroes that I need to play for like a double burn them all, like Tomeltai blow up their Null Rune end game? Not really. Not really. And again, this could all change with Dusk Till Dawn. You know, maybe Sir Bolton becomes the control hero that everyone fears. I doubt it, but you never know. I don't know what they're printing in this upcoming set. With that being said, now Dromai has tools to perhaps flex in other directions or make a deck that is a little bit more of that kind of like a mid-range almost, or the ability to pivot, like a hybrid deck maybe that allows you to kind of take that in a different direction. But her stock could certainly be going up. I would also look at, like, let's see, on OLDHIM's side of things, his another one of his big win rates is against Katsu. who, sitting on Katsu and looking at Katsu's other matchups here, this is, again, all from Calling Baltimore, which had the most amount of data we could use. Katsu's doing really well across the board in general. Has like a little bit down Briar matchup, has, overall like 50% win rates, a little bit down Lexi matchup, which is unfortunate, and a really bad Oldhim matchup. But outside of that, Katsu's like surprisingly open for business. And that is a really intriguing prospect, especially now that if Katsu can start to put together some victories, perhaps against Lexi, or at least some game plans into Lexi, then Katsu may just start to really show up and show out in general, which could be quite intriguing. And outside of those heroes, what else are we looking at? I mean, Azuri over here was a 60% win rate. And Azuri has already been showing quite promising results across the board, even though this 44% win rate is really low for the calling. The finals was literally played against an Azuri list. Azuri's been surprisingly showing up. Unfortunately, Azuri does not have a great favorable matchup into Dromai from what the data has suggested now, so it's really going to be an interesting shift, and I do think that Azuri has some capacity to kind of play into the metagame, but this is another thing that you have to worry about. Against Katsu, Azuri is also not great. So Azuri struggles against Katsu and against Dromai and a little bit against Kano. No, I'm just kidding. I'm not going to bring up Kano in every video, will I? Should I? Every video talk about Kano? Kano is the true winner here. If you look at Kano's Oldhim matchup, it was slightly favored. I mean, Kano's favored into everything, let's be honest. Kano's literally the best hero in the game, unless you're playing against Reinar, in which case, forget that trash. No one likes Reinar here. No, all this to say, if we're looking at this data, Oldhim going away perhaps allows for Katsu to get better, Dromai to get better. Maybe Lexi feels a little bit more comfortable, even though Lexi wasn't doing that bad, just a little down. Lexi gets a little bit more comfortable. And I think we also look at like the Reinars of the world, like the mid-range decks have more space in them to really kind of be flexible and like build differently. This is going to really make some interesting shifts, because if other heroes have the capability of now shifting their sideboard or their overall strategies, then it's going to allow some of these heroes down here that don't necessarily have great win rates across the board to start to manipulate their numbers as well. I mean, if you compare this to like the Pro Tour Baltimore numbers, and these are the Pro Tour Baltimore numbers, this should be as up to date as possible. But these Pro Tour numbers, like Oldhim not being fantastic into the field, losing really poorly to Dash. But Dash, by the way, I mean, if we're talking about real disappointments, I mean, this is the Dash. Like, that's not good. That's real not good. That is low. Day 139 Dash players, and only one makes it to day 2. Woof. Yeesh. Yikes. That's a yikes right there. But if we're looking at Oldhim overall, his ability to shift out of that, like meta, and how that's going to change things, going to be very intriguing to take a look at. So I want to know from you, what do you think about this change with Oldhim hitting the road? Do you find it like it's going to be a lot more liberating for your favorite hero? Is Oldhim your favorite hero? Are you going to be sad to see him go? He is technically the first hero to be Living Legended out in Blitz and in Classic Constructed, which is kind of surprising as well. What does that say about the hero in general? Is he too flexible? Is he just right? Is he, just kind of pretty dominant across the board? Or do you think it was a little bit of a fluke that it almost happens where, he picks up so many Living Legend points that he ends up lapping the old, what's her name, Briar, which was kind of funny when you think about it. Posted in a group chat that they did their best impression of like Sam Wilson and Captain America. Captain America runs by him. It's like, on your left, except that's Oldhim. And then Sam Wilson is Briar. That's essentially what it is, let's be honest. So this is some interesting developments, and it's going to make the meta slightly different in a couple of respects. I am personally looking at Katsu to really make a little bit of a surge, which I think is, it's about time. It's about time for him to make a little push. Hey, if you enjoyed this video, feel free to make that number go 1 up so that we hit an even number. I prefer evenness. If you prefer odd numbers, I guess just leave it. You could also unsubscribe, and that would also make the number even. So I'll let you decide. Either one is cool, I guess, but the subscribing is technically cooler. As always, thanks for watching.